Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to talk about those guys who were cast to play the different fighters in Van Damme's martial arts epic The Quest. Now there were 16 fighters total, 16 unique styles, and I'm going to cover the first 8 in this video, and then make sure to watch the next one I do. It's going to cover the other in part 2 of this series. Oh, if you like this kind of content, by the way, please smash that like button. It really helps support the channel. Van Damme says for 3 years he traveled the world on a quest to find the best fighters. He did a lot of research, met a lot of martial artists, and put together a team of the best. Van Damme claims he and producer Mashi Diamant must have looked at 1,000 audition tapes. All of the fighters are exceptional in their specialties, but this unfortunately doesn't necessarily come across for all of them in the film, as there was only so much time allotted for each fighter to showcase their skills and talent. Speaking of which, a lot of the guys got jealous they didn't get more screen time to showcase their skills, or because they didn't get to fight Van Damme in the movie. That makes sense. It's only natural for any one of those fighters cast in the film to be disappointed by having a limited fight scene, but I'm sure they were all happy to have had the experience, because if you think about it, I just don't see Hollywood making a big budget martial arts epic like this again. It really only happened because it was Van Damme's passion project and he was such a bankable, profitable star at the time. The order I decided to present these fighters in this video will be in the order that they got eliminated from the Gong Gang competition itself. I was able to find a lot of information on a lot of these fighters, but very little on the others. With that said, here are my findings for the first 8 fighters in part 1 of this 2-part series. So first I'm going to talk about the character Maxi Divine. Since he didn't even end up competing in the tournament, he essentially was the first one eliminated.
Maxi Divine, heavyweight champion of the world.
This man is a better fighter than me. And as the former heavyweight champion, I turn my title over to him.
James Remar played Maxi Divine, the fighter representing the United States, the world heavyweight boxing champion. Since he technically didn't fight in the tournament and had a rather large role as a major co-star, it only made sense to cast an actual actor as opposed to a fighter. He's very much like Donald Gibbs' character Jackson in Bloodsport.
That hurts me just looking at it.
Now, interestingly, James Remar is not a very large man, standing only 5'9" to 5'10" in height, which is rather small for a heavyweight boxer, at least if you go by today's standards. The guys are just enormous now. The Klitschko's, Tyson Fury, and Deontay Wilder, for example, they're all at least 6'6". Jack Dempsey was the actual heavyweight champion during the era that the Quest took place, which was the early 1920s. Dempsey held the belt from 1919 to 1926 and stood 6'1" at a weight of 187 pounds. He often fought guys that were 10 to 25 pounds heavier and utilized his smaller size to his advantage, as he was quicker than his larger opponents. Kind of similar to what Mike Tyson was able to pull off in the 1980s, standing at only 5'10". But casting someone like James Remar's size as heavyweight champ would actually make sense for the 1920s, but it'd be ridiculous for 2020. As far as acting goes, his career spans 4 decades in both film and television. He gained a minor cult following after playing Ajax in 1979's The Warriors. Other notable roles included playing Raiden in 1997's Mortal Kombat Annihilation. He also had a part in 2004's Blade Trinity and played Dexter's adoptive father Harry Morgan on the hit Showtime show Dexter. He's also appeared in Quentin Tarantino's Django Unchained as well as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He currently plays the role of Peter Gamby in the superhero show Black Lightning on the CW network.
Soviet Union against Spain!
Brick Bronski played the Russian fighter. His real name is Jeffrey Beltzner. As a teenager, he was interested in and competed in bodybuilding and won the Mr. Teenage Pennsylvania title in 1984, which qualified him for the Mr. America contest. However, he declined to participate in that event and said in an interview years later, "I just wasn't interested. To me, it's not a sport, it's a male beauty contest." I kind of have to agree with him on that. Outside of bodybuilding, he also won state and tri-state powerlifting competitions. He eventually turned to professional wrestling after graduating from Pennsylvania State University, where he would meet Doug Flex, who shared his passion for bodybuilding and wrestling. Together, they would form the tag team The Brat Pack. But prior to that partnership, Brick Bronski would travel to Canada and wrestled under the name Mr. Canada for 2.5 years. There in Calgary, he was thought to have probably been the strongest guy in the territory at the time, which is pointed out in professional wrestling historian Dave Meltzer's book, Tributes, Remembering Some of the World's Greatest Wrestlers. It must have been all that powerlifting. Doug Flex claimed Bronski was as popular there as Hulk Hogan was in the United States. He would later return to the United States and began working for the World Wrestling Federation, now known as the WWE. He was eventually offered a contract after 6 months, however declined the offer as he was unhappy with his experience. Critical of the sports entertainment aspect of the organization, he later commented, quote, "WWF was a big letdown. Competition is completely eliminated. There's a lot more to professional wrestling than the phony stuff you see on TV. Next, Bronski would reunite with his former college buddy Doug Flex, and the two would win a number of tag team titles in the National Wrestling Alliance organization. In the early 90s, while recovering from a torn bicep, Bronski would audition for the Troma Studios film Sergeant Kabukiman NYPD.
Who are you?
His first film role resulted in a standout performance, and the following year he would continue to work with Troma Studios in Class of Nukem High 2, Subhumanoid Meltdown. The film received mixed reviews, though Bronski's performance gained favorable reception from critics. He would later credit Troma Studios for making him a better performer when he resumed his pro wrestling career in the mid-90s. Retiring from the ring, he has subsequently enjoyed a sporadic acting career in addition to going into wrestling promotion with Doug Flex.
Japan against Okinawa.
The fighter from Okinawa was played by Choi Nam Yip, who's also been credited in films as Choi Nam Ip as well as Alex Yip. Despite all those aliases, I wasn't able to find out a whole lot of info on any one of them. He's trained in Wing Chun, Muay Thai, and Praying Mantis Kung Fu. He's got a pretty extensive filmography stemming from the late 80s all the way until 1998, and then one more film in 2005. One of the more notable roles he has was as a stunt double in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film, the one from 1990. Oh, and for whatever reason, I don't know why, but IMDb has him listed as a Korean fighter in The Quest, but that role was actually played by Ong-Soo Han, who I'll talk about later. Needless to say, IMDb knows even less about this guy than I do. Next up is Takis Trigelis, who played the French fighter. Born in Athens, Greece, Takis grew up in Munich, Germany. Who better to play the French fighter? At a young age, he knew that martial arts were his passion and began training in kickboxing, taekwondo, and Thai boxing. When he was 28, he traveled to Los Angeles, which would have been in the early 1980s. There, he worked as a personal trainer with many celebrities, including Michael J. White of Welcome to Sudden Death fame. In film, he's worked with Oliver Gruner in Savat, did stunt work with Steven Seagal in Ticker, and after The Quest, he'd worked with Van Damme again in 1998's Legionnaire. In America, he developed a training system called Q-Power. He'd later return to Munich, Germany, and fulfill his dream of passing along his skills and knowledge at the Munich gym. Looking at his Instagram, you could see he still really keeps busy training. Speaking of Instagram, by the way, I've had a few people in the comment section asking if I had one. I do. You could follow me at Real Viking Samurai. I don't do a lot on there. My Instagram's actually pretty lame right now, but I'm going to try to better incorporate it with this YouTube channel and just post better content on there in general, so feel free to follow. Going back to Takis Trigelis, though, his skills were better showcased at the beginning of The Quest, by the way, not during the actual competition itself. Look at these crisp moves. And he's got a $1 million smile, too. We should probably nickname him The Wiz.
Nobody beats me because I'm The Wiz! Yes, I'm The Wiz! I'm The Wiz!
China against Korea!
The Korean fighter IMDb actually got right was played by Ong-Soo Han. He's a black belt in Taekwondo. Interestingly, he doesn't throw one kick during his fight in The Quest, which doesn't really make sense since the character is representing Korea and there's no reason why his character wouldn't be a Taekwondo practitioner. For one, that's primarily the martial art Korea is known for, and two, he's a legitimate black belt in real life, which I'm sure helped get him cast in the role. There's probably a bunch of footage that ended up on the cutting room floor. So Ong-Soo Han began his career in Thailand. He played one of Tong Po's opponents in 1989's Kickboxer. Shortly after, while working as a fitness instructor at a Bangkok hotel, he won his first speaking role in 1990's King of the Kickboxers because it was noticed that he had a grasp of the English language. From there, he'd star in Dragon the Bruce Lee story opposite Jason Scott Lee and gave us one of the more memorable fight scenes in that film. He'd follow that up with stunt work in Van Damme's Street Fighter film, have a role in the sequel to Bloodsport, then years later, in 1999, he'd get his first major role, actually playing a good guy, opposite Roddy Piper in 1999's buddy cop film Last to Surrender. The film would see a maverick American cop and his Chinese counterpart join forces to bring a drug dealer and the hired thugs to justice. The film had a really troubled production. For example, the film shoot in Indonesia was plagued by unforeseen accidents and difficulties. A traffic accident caused 3 trucks carrying film equipment to flip over and almost fall off a cliff. A legitimate anti-government riot halted filming of the city harbor scene. A flash flood in the jungle destroyed a military encampment set, and a plane filming aerial footage crashed into the jungle, resulting in the death of the pilot. The film really sounds cursed. So I haven't seen the movie, but going by a review from Have a Go Heroes, which I'll link in the description below, the reviewer summarizes, "It's an enjoyable romp and one of the last decent vehicles for Roddy Piper. Sadly, because Han Soo-ong didn't make much of an impression, his Hollywood career seemed to hit a dead end. That would end up being his last film. It's really hard to say why he decided to quit acting after 10 years. Could have been a combination of that troubled production along with his performance in the film he finally had a major part in. According to IMDb, he's been working as a health club manager of the Four Seasons Hotel in Bangkok since 1999, when that movie came out, so he kind of just went full circle there. Overall, he had a decent run, much better filmography than a lot of the other guys on this list.
Turkey against Scotland.
Mike Lambert played the Scottish fighter, and I can pretty much guarantee you've seen quite a few of the other films he's worked on outside of The Quest. He's always wanted to be a stuntman ever since he was a kid growing up watching Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee movies, as well as a television show, The A-Team. He got involved with martial arts at a fairly young age, karate at 10, Wing Chun Kung Fu at 12, then Taekwondo at 14 because he really loved all those fancy kicks. He's actually won several tournaments as well as titles. For example, he's a 5-time British Taekwondo champion and in 1991 was a top 3 light heavyweight Taekwondo stylist in the world. He's also the only light heavyweight fighter to win British titles in both WTF and ITF Taekwondo. Having won those titles, Bay Logan, the editor of Combat Magazine, suggested Mike Lambert go to Hong Kong and try to get involved in films over there. He spent 6 years there, learning the ropes as a stuntman and action actor. He got the opportunity to work with Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and Donnie Yen. Mike Lambert's skills were so good they were even acknowledged by the Hong Kong Stuntman Association, which took him as a member, a rare honor for foreigners. Lambert has stated that a lot of the Hong Kong stuntmen think of a lot of Western guys as slow and sluggish, but he was able to prove them wrong despite being much larger, standing 6'1" and weighing 185 pounds. We didn't get to see much of him in The Quest, but here's some footage of him displaying those skills in other films. He's currently still working as a stuntman and fight coordinator and has been doing it for nearly 30 years now. He's most recently worked on Star Wars Episode 9, Rise of the Skywalker, and here's a bunch of other popular films: Captain America, Casino Royale, and Gladiator, just to name a few. I told you you'd seen a movie he's been in outside of The Quest.
Africa.
The fighter from Africa was played by Dr. Winston Ellis, who's of Jamaican descent and was born in Reading, Berkshire, England. To get his interest badge in Boy Scouts, he needed a hobby. As a result, he decided to take up martial arts at the age of 12 and hasn't looked back since. He's practiced Shaolin Eagle Claw Kung Fu, which whenever I hear about that style of Kung Fu, I always picture Billy Blanks punching a hole through that tree stump in Talons of the Eagle. Aside from Kung Fu, Winston Ellis is also a 3-time Thai kickboxing world champion. After his martial arts career came to an end, an opportune meeting with Hong Kong actor-director Philip Ko led to Winston moving to Hong Kong to pursue film. This led to several appearances in a number of martial arts movies with actors such as Jackie Chan and Jet Li. Returning to the UK, Winston was instrumental in the launch of the Positive Strides UK initiative Project Postcode, which used film and media to educate 11 and 19-year-olds about modern social issues such as drug and alcohol abuse, gun and knife crime, and antisocial behavior. As far as movies go, he's been in some pretty big films such as Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest, and Pirates of the Caribbean At World's End, as well as The Dark Knight. He's still working in film and television, primarily as an actor, but is currently executive producing a documentary called The Beast, When Eddie Met Arnie. This is referring to the World's Strongest Man competitor Eddie Hall meeting Arnold Schwarzenegger. It sounds interesting. The World's Strongest Man, Eddie the Beast Hall, has reached the pinnacle of his career and finds himself at a crossroads in his life. Despite his immense achievements, Eddie suffered from bouts of depression throughout his career and now is in a place where he can no longer continue in the sport that saved him from himself. In danger of falling back into the dark world of depression, Eddie looks for a new channel of expression and turns to his lifelong hero and friend Arnold Schwarzenegger in the hopes that he can follow him into the world of Hollywood. I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but Eddie Hall is currently training for a boxing match against fellow strongman competitor and the Mountain character from Game of Thrones, Hathor Bjornsson. That's supposed to take place in September of 2021. I did a preview trailer for the fight a while back that I'll link in the description below.
Germany against
The fighter from Germany was played by Habby Hesk. He's been involved in martial arts for over 40 years now. He started training in judo in 1978 at the age of 10. 3 years later, he would take up boxing, and shortly after become friends with Gary Childs, a black belt in karate. At the age of 16, Habby Hesk would earn his own first Dan black belt in karate. He's always had an interest in fighting and started competing in amateur kickboxing fights in his early teens. In 1988, at 20 years old, he traveled to Thailand in order to learn the finer art of Muay Thai kickboxing. After returning to Perth, Australia in 1991, he started training with Rod Stroud, who would become Habby's manager once his kickboxing career turned professional. He'd go on to win state, national, and South Pacific titles in the cruiserweight and heavyweight divisions. During this time, he'd continued to advance in his study of karate and was awarded the role of 5th Dan black belt. During Happy's professional career, he traveled to the United States twice a year to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Rickson Gracie. 3 years of training would earn him a blue belt. He would later travel to Brazil and train under Royler Gracie in Rio de Janeiro and competed in the World Mundial Jiu-Jitsu Championships in 1999. He's actually competed as recently as 2019, winning a silver medal in the IBJJF World Masters Championships in the US, as well as a silver medal in the IBJJF Pan Pacs No-Gi Championship in Australia. He's currently a third-degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. These days, he dedicates most of his time teaching at the M1FC in Australia. He has over 600 students and over a dozen amateur and professional fighters who compete in MMA, Jiu-Jitsu, Shuto, and Muay Thai kickboxing. Some of his students have become world champions as well as UFC fighters. So that's the first 8 fighters from the Quest. Make sure to check back later in the companion piece part 2 where I'll cover the remaining 8 fighters. One of them actually competed in the UFC himself. And make sure to comment below, by the way, which of these 8 fighters I covered in this video are you most impressed with?